My true story from Florida. At my daughter's wedding, they told me just show up and stay out of the way. I did. I also didn't mention the $9 million 0 cents inheritance. Thank God they showed me who they really were. Under the soft buzz of fluorescent lights in her small Florida apartment, I, Ruslana Bennett, age 72, stood in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting the hem of a soft lavender dress. It was modest, tasteful, not flashy enough to draw attention, not plain enough to seem like I did not try. The invitation to my daughter Mira's wedding had come in the form of a group message. No embossed cardstock, no call, just a text. We'd love for you to be there, Mom. Please just show up and stay out of the way. I didn't respond, but I marked the date. That morning, I had laid out my grandmother's pearl brooch, the one Mira used to beg to wear for dress-up. I polished it until it gleamed like new. As I pinned it to my lapel, a new message popped up in the group chat. Just a reminder. No need for Mom to make a speech or anything. Let's keep the energy young, fresh, and brand-limed. I stared at the words. Brand-limed. Was that what weddings were now? I scrolled back and reread a message Mira had sent 2 days prior when I asked if she'd like me to bring the lemon tarts she used to love. Mom, we'll have catering. You don't need to bring your usual. The pause before your usual stung like vinegar in a paper cut. There was another message from Matt, her fiancé. Let's make sure Mom's seat isn't too visible for photos, maybe off to the side. And no microphone access, just in case. I closed the chat. I had seen enough. It was not just the messages, it was the tone, the polite condescension, the way Mira looked through me now, not at me, as if motherhood had an expiration date. I remembered her words from last week when I asked if she wanted me to help her with anything at the venue. She didn't look up from her phone. You didn't build anything, Mom. You just outlived your usefulness. She said it like she was stating a fact. Like I was an appliance from a previous decade, still humming, still functioning, but outdated and in the way. I had not always been this small in her eyes. There was a time when Mira clung to my legs and called me her hero, when she cried into my lap after her first heartbreak, and I stayed up all night making tea and whispering that one day someone would see her the way she deserved. When I worked 2 jobs, librarian by day, diner waitress by night, so she could go to college without debt. I sold my wedding ring to pay for her first laptop. I clipped coupons so she could have braces and prom dresses. We rented for 30 years. I didn't buy a house until after my husband Hank passed. He left everything to me. Stocks, land, a modest but well-diversified portfolio worth just over $9 million. It shocked me when the lawyer told me. He wanted you secure, he said, and he trusted you to do what's right with it. I had spent the last year arranging to gift Mira $5 million on her wedding day. It was going to be a surprise, a transfer into a trust, activated on her wedding night. A way to say, I believe in your future. I had already had the papers drawn, notarized, placed neatly in a gold envelope. I planned to hand it to her privately after the toasts. But now, standing here, I was no longer sure. This was not a moment of bitterness. It was clarity. The words weren't an isolated jab. They were the tip of something growing for years. A slow distancing. A recalibration of how much my presence was valued. I was no longer the center of her universe. I understood that. Children grow. But I had not expected to be banished from it entirely. I turned to my dresser, opened the second drawer. Inside, I kept all the important papers. Birth certificates, Hank's will, the original trust documents. I reached for the gold envelope. My fingers hesitated on the edge. $5 million. Not an inheritance, a gift. But gifts should be received with open arms, not clenched teeth. I sat down, folded the envelope in half, then again. I did not tear it, not yet. But something inside me had already shifted. I looked in the mirror again. The lavender dress still fit, but I felt differently in it now. Not like a mother attending her daughter's wedding. Like a witness preparing for the last performance of a role she no longer recognized. Let them have their perfect photos, I thought. Their string lights and monogrammed napkins and carefully curated smiles. I would be there, quiet, polite, present, but I would not be invisible. The ring I sold had 3 small diamonds set in a crooked line, Hank bought it with a mechanic's paycheck and a smile too wide for his own good. Not much now, he told me on one knee, but it'll shine with time. I wore it through 37 years of mornings, of meals stretched thin, of birthdays with handmade cards and Christmases with coupons. It only left my finger once, when I slid it off at the pawn shop so Mira could enroll at the University of Florida. First semester tuition was due and her financial aid hadn't cleared. She had called me, crying in the stairwell of her dorm. "Mom, they're going to drop my classes." I didn't even pause. I drove 2 hours, walked into the pawn shop with a quiet heart, and handed over the ring. The man behind the counter looked at it and asked, "You sure?" I said, "I've never been more sure." I didn't tell Mira until years later. She was 20 by then, already talking about internships and grad school. She had hugged me tight and whispered into my shoulder, "Someday I'll take care of you, Mom. You won't lift a finger." That was before Matt, before designer sunglasses and country club brunches, before Mira started calling me mother in that clipped, polite tone like I was someone else's mother she'd just met, before she started referring to our old neighborhood as charming in a nostalgic way, which is code for I wouldn't be caught dead there now. Matt was all polish and posture, heir to a line of investment bankers, educated in Connecticut, and always ready with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. The first time he came to dinner, he looked at my casserole like it might bite him. Later, I overheard him in the hallway asking Mira if my silverware was ironic. I didn't know what that meant until much later. The last Thanksgiving we spent together, I brought a pumpkin pie. Homemade, like always. Matt took one bite and said, "You know, Whole Foods has a seasonal spiced version that's pretty elevated, just FYI." I smiled and nodded. I had learned not to fight the tide. Mira changed her vocabulary around him. She stopped calling herself a first-gen college graduate. She started saying things like we came from humble beginnings and my mom worked in libraries, bless her. She stopped asking me to visit her apartment, citing space issues. Then she stopped calling altogether. When I mentioned this to her once, she said, "It's not personal, Mom. We're just building a different kind of life." Then she added, half laughing, "You wouldn't really enjoy the people we spend time with. They're intense." She meant rich. She meant polished. She meant not you. The hardest part wasn't the distance. It was the shame she wore like perfume, so faint but so consistent, as if I were something she had to outgrow to be accepted, as if I were a mistake she'd rather not explain. I began noticing things. Mira's wedding registry included $400 0-cent candle holders. Her bridal shower was hosted at a vineyard I couldn't pronounce. The bridesmaids wore silk gowns. I was asked to coordinate, not match. When I sent in a suggestion for a song I once sang to her as a lullaby, Edelweiss, she replied, "That's not really the vibe we're going for." Then there were the little jabs. The time Matt asked if I could not use cash at the rehearsal dinner because it was awkward when the server brings change. Or when Mira told the wedding planner, within earshot, "I'll cover any gaps in decor. I don't expect contributions from everyone." That everyone meant me. I had raised her with values, humility, compassion, grit. I thought I was giving her wings. But maybe, without meaning to, I also gave her the desire to fly as far away from me as she could. Still, I had never expected to be treated as a relic, something you keep in a drawer, dust off when convenient, but never display. I wasn't looking for a parade, not even a thank you. But I had hoped, just once, to be looked at like I mattered again. What Mira didn't know, what no one knew, was that I held the keys to more than memories. I had the power to change her life in one signature. That gold envelope with the $5 million transfer document? It had been sitting in my dresser for 6 months, waiting for the right moment. But the moment never came. Because with every condescending look, every dismissive sigh, every polished insult, Mira showed me exactly who she had become, and more painfully, exactly how little she remembered who I was. I sat in the corner of the bridal boutique's lobby the day I offered to bring lemon tarts to Mira's rehearsal dinner. The tablecloths would be white, the linens mountain-pressed, and the room smelled of spring flowers and expensive candles. I had practiced folding each tart into a silver tray, garnished with fresh mint and a drizzle of honey. It was elegant, heartfelt, meant to say I remembered the little things she loved. When I mentioned it, Mira's eyes didn't flick up from her phone. Her voice was flat. "Mom," she said, "That's really sweet of you, but we are going for a different vibe. We'll have catering." She gave me a tight smile, a forced nod. I felt my heart contract. I shrugged and said, "Of course." I only wanted to help. I didn't ask what vibe they were going for. The invitation I received to the wedding was the first clue that I was no longer in the inner circle. There was no parents of the bride title next to my name. There was no photo of us included in the pre-wedding slideshow or on any printed collateral. There were no lilies, tied with jade ribbon, to mark my place at the head table. I was there, in cursive, under the word guests, but not there. And I understood the message: invisible doesn't hurt. It's silence that cuts the deepest. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was in poor taste, I told myself. Maybe I was reading too much into traditions that have evolved with wedding planners and mood boards. But then Matt dropped his line, a careless comment over lunch with family. "I think we should do gift cards. Ruslana might show up with her old baking or something homemade. I don't want there to be any bump in the curated aesthetic." He looked relieved when I didn't answer. I pushed my plate away, attended the rest of the conversation from behind a veneer of calm. A week before the wedding, I called Mira to drop off the gift envelope, my surprise. The paperwork was ready, $5 million reserved in trust, to be released once she walked down the aisle. A promise more powerful than any toast. But Mira's assistant answered. "Hi, Ruslana. Mira is out. She's in fitting number 3. She'll be in touch." She gave that clipped professional tone I remembered from her boss's office, not her daughter. I said, "Okay, dear." I didn't ask when she might be back. When I finally spoke to her, it was over text. "Thanks, Mom. So kind of you. But I don't need anything right now." And then, "We are really looking forward to seeing you." That smiley face that meant, "Please don't ask again." I stood by the floral display at the wedding venue 3 days before the ceremony. The scent of peonies and eucalyptus filled the air. I brushed my hand along a white arch. I pictured myself walking through it, giving her the envelope, wishing her love and light. Then I tucked my hand away and left the room. I had left the full transfer contract on the dresser at home, folded and waiting for her, like a secret promise. It had been drawn up, sealed, notarized, $5 million. I had met with my old attorney twice to confirm everything. He told me, "She never has to know until you want her to." We both smiled. But chairs were being placed now, tables were being set. This was no longer about love. It was about images. On the morning of the wedding, I found the envelope again. I sat at my kitchen table, with sunlight slipping through the blinds. My heart pressed on something invisible that day. I looked at the contract again. $5 million. For her, and only if I chose. I didn't sign. I hadn't torn it either, but in that moment, I understood that the power to give had become the power to teach. At the rehearsal dinner, I smiled when I was introduced as Mira's mother at my seat on the side. I made conversation with distant cousins and nodded when they asked how I was doing. I complimented the lighting. I asked the florist a question. I kept still, like a porcelain figurine that cost too much to break. They needed me to look perfect, but not speak. That night at home, I placed the envelope back inside my drawer, next to my husband's old letters, the $9 million inheritance papers, and a picture of Mira when she was 5, sitting on my lap, mustard yellow dress and gummy smile. The next morning, I took a deep breath before walking into the courtyard where the ceremony would be held. I pinned my pearl brooch to the dress and smoothed imaginary wrinkles from the skirt. I thought about offering the transfer, but I knew now that offering might teach a different lesson than I intended. I wanted her to know that love doesn't come with a price tag, until she realized that some tags are worth honoring. At the top of the aisle, Mira turned and smiled, her arm looped through her father's. She looked radiant in her custom gown, cathedral veil trailing behind her. She smiled at me. I lifted my chin and nodded, and I walked past her, down the center aisle, knowing that today my silence was more honest than any gift I could give. Because she didn't need the money, she needed my respect. And today, I didn't give it. The sun over the Florida coast hung low and golden, casting a soft amber glow across the courtyard of the Grand Palmetto Resort. White chairs lined either side of a shell-strewn aisle, flanked by imported orchids and candles that flickered in tall glass lanterns. Music hummed from hidden speakers, the string quartet invisible behind a draped white partition. It was, by all accounts, a perfect wedding day. I arrived alone, dressed in soft dove gray, hair pinned back, pearl brooch shining against my collar. I was early, always early, and I smiled politely when the usher scanned my name on the list. Ruslana Bennett, he said, blinking at the tablet. Yes? Ah, table 11, near the veranda. He handed me a folded program. Enjoy the evening. Table 11 was near the restrooms. No flowers, no name card, just a quiet little corner next to a utility door. The napkin at my place setting was the wrong color, ivory instead of pearl. A small, silly detail, but it confirmed everything. The reception hall filled with gold light and guests in soft chatter. I watched as the tables near the front sparkled with custom menus, calligraphy place cards, and framed black and white photos of Matt's family. When the servers began to pour the wine, the music faded, and the MC, a man in a tux too tight for comfort, stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he said with rehearsed charm, please help me welcome the proud parents of the bride and groom. Applause erupted as Matt's mother rose from her seat near the stage. She wore deep plum, diamonds at her neck, and held on to Matt's father as she ascended the steps. The MC's voice boomed. Mrs. Cynthia Lawrence, a guiding light in our bride's journey and a woman who embodies elegance and grace. I looked down at my lap. No one turned toward my table. No one called my name. I stood. The linen on my chair clung slightly to the hem of my dress as I pushed it back. I moved slowly, my fingers grazing the gold purse I had placed on the table. Each step felt heavier than the last. I reached the second row from the front when a figure blocked my path. Matt! He held out one arm like a gate. Excuse me, Ruslana, this is for the real parents, real. I looked past him to the stage, where Mira stood beside the MC. Her gown glowed under the spotlight. She didn't move to come down, didn't speak, just raised the mic and with a tired smile said into the speakers, Mom, I told you already this is not the time for drama. You wanted to come, we let you come. Please, don't ruin the moment. Ruin. I opened my purse. The gold envelope was still there, tucked between a handkerchief and a small packet of tissues. I held it for a moment, feeling its weight. It wasn't heavy, just a few sheets of official paper, notarized, signed by my attorney, and ready for delivery. Inside was the transfer of $5 million, a wedding gift, meant to be a blessing. I turned toward the guests. 300 people, silent now, no string music, no laughter, just eyes, watching. I took one step forward. My voice was steady. I was going to give this to you tonight, Mira. I had it prepared. $5 million, yours, a wedding gift. Gasps echoed across the hall. Someone dropped a fork. Mira blinked. What are you talking about? I turned the envelope around and opened it, pulling out the document. I held it high for just a moment before folding it slowly, edge to edge. You said I wasn't needed. You said I was decoration. Background. I looked at the paper in my hands. I thought of the nights I cleaned office buildings after my library shift to pay her school fees. The years I packed second-hand coats for winter trips. The Christmas when she was 9 and asked why Santa didn't come, so I stayed up all night sewing a doll from socks. You made it clear, Mira, I said. You don't want me. I tore the paper in half. The sound was clean, sharp, audible. A gasp swept the room. Then I tore it again. And again. Tiny pieces of gold paper fluttered to the floor like fallen leaves. Mira clutched the edge of the table, her lips parted. Wait, what? Her knees buckled. Matt grabbed her arm, trying to steady her. You did not, Mom! What are you doing? She cried out. The MC backed away, the microphone squealing with feedback. I looked directly at my daughter, my voice calm, even. You don't need a mother, I said, so you don't need her gift. The silence in the room was like a held breath. I set the shredded envelope on the stage's edge. Then I turned. 300 eyes followed me as I walked back to table 11. I sat, picked up my napkin, smoothed it over my lap. The music did not start again, not for a long while. The morning after the wedding, the Florida air felt heavier. No longer the gentle, salt-kissed breeze of a seaside celebration, but thick with something unspoken. In my home, the silence wrapped around me like an old quilt, familiar, fraying, and heavier than it looked. I opened the drawer of my writing desk. Beneath a stack of letters and my late husband's fountain pen was the will. Not a copy, the original, drafted in 1998, a year before his cancer took him. I remembered his voice that day, raspy but determined. "I don't have a lot of time, Ruslana," he said, "but I want you to feel safe, and I want Mira to know she comes from strength." He left everything to me, with a clause, upon my passing, our estate would be transferred in full to our only daughter. It was generous, thoughtful, exactly the kind of man he was. At the time, we didn't even know how much the land would appreciate, or what his early shares in several small tech companies would be worth. Now, that estate was valued at over $9 million. And last night she had looked at me as if I were nothing but background noise. I stared at the will. My hand hovered over the signature line, the ink long since dried. His writing had always been neat, deliberate, a reflection of a man who planned every step, every legacy. But he hadn't planned for this. He hadn't planned for our daughter to grow cold. He hadn't seen her erase me from her wedding, from her narrative. And maybe, if he were alive, he would have made excuses. But he wasn't. I was. And I was done explaining love to someone who used me as a placeholder. I picked up the phone and dialed Edward's number. He was my husband's friend first, now mine by loyalty. A sharp man with a soft spot for justice. "I need to revise the will," I told him. He didn't ask why. He simply said, "Come by tomorrow." The next day, I sat across from him in his office, surrounded by shelves of legal tomes and framed certificates. Edward wore glasses now, his hair a little thinner, but his gaze was still as precise as ever. He reviewed the original documents and then placed his pen gently on the desk. "You're sure about this?" "I'm done giving away what hasn't been earned," I replied. He nodded. "You can leave it to anyone. Blood is not a legal obligation, Ruslana. Love can be written into law just as firmly." He tapped the form. "People think death is the last say, but really, this," he pointed to the updated will, "this is your voice after you're gone." I signed my name, deliberate, steady, and when he asked for a beneficiary, I gave him 2 names. The first was the Silver Branch Foundation, a nonprofit for elder rights advocacy. I had read about them in a magazine last year. They helped women like me who had been dismissed, disrespected, and silenced by the very families they raised. The second was a boy named Jonah, my niece's son, barely 17. He had sent me birthday cards every year without fail. When he heard I had a cold, he once mailed a small care package of tea and socks with a sticky note that read, "Get warm, stay strong, you're my favorite." Jonah didn't carry my last name, but he carried something my daughter had forgotten: kindness. Edward finalized the revisions and filed them for safekeeping. When he handed me the sealed copy, he said something I will never forget. "You don't owe legacy to a name. You owe it to the memory of how you were treated." I left his office, lighter than I had felt in years. I went home, boiled a cup of chamomile, sat on my porch with the ocean barely visible in the distance. I watched the sun begin to set, that beautiful golden hue dipping below the horizon, and I thought, this is what clarity feels like. The papers from the wedding had already begun to circulate, photos on social media, hashtags of perfection. No one tagged me, no one remembered to mention the mother of the bride. But I didn't mind. They could have their spotlight. I had something stronger. A silence filled with purpose, and a future no longer chained to the past. The headlines came slowly at first, in the form of whispering emails and carefully worded LinkedIn posts. A boutique real estate firm pulled out of Matt's latest development pitch citing unforeseen reputational risks. A planned launch event was quietly canceled. A blog picked up a story titled, "Mother Disowned at $200, 0-cent K Seaside Wedding. Witnesses say she tore up check meant for the bride." It didn't take long for the ripple to become a wave. Matt's firm lost a major client, one that had been in talks for nearly 6 months. The official reason: trust is our brand. Behind closed doors, it was clear. No investor wants to be tied to the image of a man whose mother-in-law publicly severed ties in a room full of CEOs and legacy donors. By the end of the second week, Mira's curated wedding album, once the crown jewel of her Instagram feed, had quietly been deleted. Her stories went silent. She stopped responding to comments altogether. That's when she called. My phone rang at 7:42 p.m. I was in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew. "Mom?" Her voice was brittle. "It's Mira." I said nothing. She filled the silence. I know it's late, but I just wanted to say, we didn't mean for it to go that far. It wasn't supposed to be like that. I placed my tea down. "You told me not to breathe too loudly, Mira." Soft inhale. "I know, and I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was overwhelmed. There was so much pressure. Matt's family, the image, the planning. We were trying to make it perfect." I almost laughed, not out of joy, but disbelief. "You edited your life, Mira. You airbrushed your past. You put filters over your own mother." No, Mom, that's not fair. I just wanted the wedding to go smoothly. That's all. It was one day." "No," I said quietly. "It was never just one day. It was years of paper cuts." She was silent. I continued, "You didn't just hurt me. You made me feel like I no longer had value, like I was expired, like I belonged behind the curtain. But really, Mira, you reminded me that I don't have to keep giving to people who only take." Her breath hitched. "I don't want money," she said. "I'm not calling about that." "I know," I replied, "because it's gone." She hesitated. "You mean," I rewrote my will. "The $5 million is off the table. The $9 million inheritance from your father, no longer yours." "No, Mom, wait. You can't just—" "I can," I said, soft but firm. "I did." "You're angry?" she whispered. "I'm clear." Silence again, the kind that fills a space like water in a sinking boat. "I miss you," she said finally. "I miss the smell of cinnamon toast on Saturday mornings. I miss the way you used to sing in the kitchen when you thought no one was listening." My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. "I miss that too," I said. "But you buried her beneath silk and seating charts. Can't we start again?" "You already did," I said, "without me." There was nothing cruel in my voice, just truth. Honest, weathered, unmovable. She didn't hang up. She didn't argue. She just breathed. I let the silence hold us both for a moment longer before I spoke again. "Mira, I didn't slam the door. You walked past it. I simply turned off the porch light." The line crackled. "I hope," I said, "that one day you remember what it meant to have a mother who would have given you the world." And then, gently, I hung up. The tea had gone cold, but I didn't reheat it. Some things, once left too long, are better poured out. The new life did not come with fireworks. It came with a smaller bed, quieter mornings, and an unexpected sense of peace. I moved into a boutique elder living community just outside St. Augustine, an airy, sun-drenched place that smelled of citrus and clean linens. My suite had a porch facing the rose garden, where I took my coffee every morning with the same reverence I used to reserve for Sunday church. No one here asked me who I was in relation to someone else. No one called me Matt's mother-in-law or Emily's wife or Mira's mom. Here, I was simply Miss Ruslana, or, as the staff began to call me after a few weeks, Miss Ruslana, the one who keeps her word. They said it with a smile, a touch of admiration. The nickname started when a nurse heard me say, "If I say I'll bring ginger cookies Tuesday, you better be ready with tea." I kept my word. Always had. That reputation traveled down hallways and found its way to the community board, where I began teaching a weekly workshop. The stories we never told. Residents came with old photos, half-written letters, and memories too heavy for casual conversation. I listened. I taught them how to write it down, how to shape pain into testimony. At night, I read, and on one morning in early October, I took a stack of forms from my drawer, signed, sealed, and waiting, and mailed them all at once. The first was to the Silver Roots Foundation, a nonprofit that protects seniors from financial and emotional abuse. I transferred the bulk of what had been Matt and Mira's future inheritance to them, nearly $7 million. I asked that a portion be allocated for legal aid for elders disrespected or silenced by their family. The fund would be named the Quiet Chair Grant. The second was to a small liberal arts college in Georgia. It was the same school Mira had attended, though I doubted she remembered. I had opened a scholarship in my husband's name, the Alexander Bennett Memorial Award, specifically for first-generation female students raised by single mothers. Every year, one girl would receive full tuition, with a handwritten note from me. This was built from second jobs, sleepless nights, and hope that never expired. We believe in you. And finally, the third was a small, simple envelope with a gold edge and my handwriting on the front. To Mira Lawrence, from Mom inside, was a Christmas card. Nothing flashy, no glitter, no apology, just my words, steady, clean. You had the party. I kept my dignity. We both got exactly what we chose. No check enclosed, no invitation to call. Just the truth, wrapped in ribbon and restraint. When I walked to the rose garden that evening, my cane tapping gently against the brick path, one of the caregivers brought me a cup of tea. She was 24, working part-time to support her nursing studies. Her name was Jenna. "You're like the classy godmother of the whole building," she said. I chuckled. "That sounds expensive." She smiled. "People listen when you talk." "They're not listening to my voice," I said, sipping my tea. "They're listening to the fact I finally stopped whispering." That night, I lit a single candle by the window. Not for anyone in particular, just as a reminder. Dignity is not a gift from others, it's something you keep even when no one's watching. I didn't need a last name to make a legacy, I just needed to stop begging people to remember mine. 2 years passed. The rose garden bloomed through 2 springs and weathered 2 hurricanes. I outlived another 2 sets of neighbors. And every Tuesday night, I still hosted my workshop. Smaller now, but deeper somehow. Grief, when given space to breathe, always finds its shape. Then one morning, tucked among coupons and appointment reminders in my mailbox, was a cream envelope. Handwritten, no return address, but I recognized the slope of the R, the way the tail of the EL looped nervously like it was afraid to touch the line. It was Mira. The paper trembled in my hand before I even opened it. The seal wasn't licked shut, just folded carefully, as if she couldn't bring herself to make it final. Inside, a single page. "Dear Mom, I don't know if you'll read this. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. It's been 2 years since the wedding. 2 years since I let a room full of strangers matter more than the woman who raised me. I thought I was curating a life, but I was really just erasing myself, piece by piece. Matt's company collapsed 6 months after you walked out. His investors pulled everything. He blamed bad press, but I knew it started the moment the guests stopped clapping. We sold the house. I moved into a 2-bedroom rental. The wallpaper peels in the corner of the kitchen. Sometimes it reminds me of the old apartment where you made cinnamon toast and hummed old war songs. I found a photo of us, you and me, on my first day of kindergarten. I was holding your hand so tightly. You were smiling at the camera, but your eyes were on me. I remember thinking you looked like a shield. I'm sorry, Mom, for forgetting, for turning my back, for being the kind of daughter I would never want to raise. I miss you. Love, Mira. I read the letter twice, then a 3rd time, not because I didn't understand it, but because I understood it too well. Regret is a language I'd grown fluent in, and now I heard it in her voice for the first time. But I didn't cry. I folded the letter slowly, reverently, and placed it inside the carved wooden box on my nightstand, right next to a photo of me and Alexander on our wedding day. Both of us smiling, not yet knowing the sacrifices ahead. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. Some things cannot be purchased by apology, and some people, no matter the blood, no longer feel like home. If this story reached something inside you, if you've ever sat quietly while someone else took the spotlight, smiled for the photos, basked in applause you helped make possible, then you understand. You understand the ache of invisibility, the silence that isn't peaceful, but heavy. You know what it feels like to be erased not with violence, but with indifference. And if you've ever stood at the edge of a room that should have been yours too, watching your name not be called, your hand not be held, your love not be named, then maybe, just maybe, you also understand what it means to reclaim yourself. This wasn't just a story about a wedding. It wasn't even a story about money. Though money can illuminate everything we'd rather keep hidden, this was a story about dignity. About a woman who gave her life to someone who stopped seeing her as a person and started treating her like a burden. A woman who loved so deeply that she was willing to be forgotten, until she wasn't. It's easy to dismiss people when they get older. to speak over them, to roll our eyes at their memories, their slow steps, their careful hands. But what this world forgets, what families too often forget, is that there is strength in silence, power in stillness, and a kind of memory that doesn't fade, it sharpens. You see, Ruslana didn't walk out of her daughter's wedding because she wanted attention. She walked out because for the first time in a long time, she realized she still had a choice. She still had a name. She still had something to protect, herself. It would have been easy to yell, to curse, to fight fire with fire. But dignity doesn't make a scene. Dignity waits. Dignity watches. Dignity prepares. And when the moment is right, dignity speaks. When Ruslana tore that document half, she wasn't just revoking a gift. She was reclaiming her value. She was saying, without shouting, "You don't get to erase me." And when she rewrote her will, she did what so many mothers are afraid to do. She let go. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. She understood that legacy isn't about blood. It's about honor. Her money will now build something better than a centerpiece. It will build futures. It will protect those who, like her, sat quietly for too long. It will remind other daughters, other sons, other families that love is not owed, it is earned. And the letter? The one Mira sent 2 years too late? It came from a place of pain. Real pain. And perhaps even real love. But some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt with paper and ink. Some doors don't close loudly, they just stop opening. Still, Ruslana didn't slam it. She didn't tear it up like she did the check. She read it. She remembered. And she placed it next to the man who once promised her she'd never be alone in this world, because in her own way, she wasn't. She had her dignity, her memories, her truth, and in the end that was more than enough. If stories like this live somewhere deep in you, if you're tired of pretending you weren't hurt, if you've ever wished someone else would finally say, "I see you," then Grandma True Stories is for you. Here we tell it like it was. We don't romanticize and we don't embellish. We remember, we speak, and we invite you to listen. So subscribe. Because when grandmothers speak, they don't shout, but they never whisper again. Until next time.